Hello, my name is Dr. Scott Young, and today we're going to answer some questions, and it comes via Silence Dogood. Now, if you watch him on Telegram, you're going to check him out. I really recommend that you do that because he actually pushed out my question because I was saying, let's talk about some NESARA questions in here. So in NESARA, I'm just looking down my notes here. So we're talking about debt forgiveness, okay, or a forgiveness jubilee for the fiscally irresponsible versus the responsible person. Okay, so let's give you an example of one type of guy, and we're just going to say Scott. Scott's over here, and he's got debt to income up the wazoo, credit card debt, car payments, all these different things that he has. And so Scott is really struggling to make his payments. And so he has that issue that goes on in his life, and he probably doesn't have a lot of savings. Versus Steve. Steve is over here, and he has been very fiscally responsible, has a slightly older car, he's been careful with his payments, all kinds of different things, has very little debt, maybe just has a house, or maybe doesn't have anything at all with that. His credit is great, and so we have these two competing things. Scott, who's got a lot of payments out there, but very little cash in the bank, probably, versus Steve over here, who's probably got cash in the bank, but he doesn't have a lot of debt issues. So we talk about this issue that NESARA would bring about a debt forgiveness. Now, people excuse me, people talk about this a debt jubilee. And basically the way you have to think about it, we're in late September right now, and we're going to see the Fed just go right off the cliff. And that's not a bad thing because Trump has the ability to kind of slide in the gold standard in that kind of way. Let me shut that so it's not bothering you. So he's able to slide in the debt forgiveness very easily with this under the gold standard, and so it's just going to be under the Treasury, so the Fed just goes right off the cliff with the other people. Now, I think that you can bring back a type, not a Fed, but a type of banking system that would work just basically as the U.S. Mint. Okay, but that's a different conversation there. Now, do you realize that all the debts of America, we'll just talk about America, but it's actually the same way in the world for the NESARA conversation. But all the debts are sitting with the central bank. Our central bank is called the Fed. And so all the debts go right through there. So the SWIFT accounts, that when you have the account number, so you have your account number, and then you also have the routing number. And that routing number is exactly what you see that tells the SWIFT system or the Fed exactly what you've done. So if you transfer $1,000 to a PayPal, or back from that, or you go from one checking account to a savings account, or pay off a credit card, or pay your mortgage any other way, they know all that stuff is happening because it's sitting upon the balance sheet in essence in that way. Now, not everything sits on the balance sheet of the Fed, but what I do see is there's quite a few different things that actually are sitting upon the balance sheet. And so Scott over here gets all his debt forgiveness. Great. And he's like, oh, yeah, this is awesome. But Scott doesn't know how to live in a cash-rich society. Now, what I mean by that is not saying that, he's going to have, millions and millions of dollars. I don't believe that whatsoever. Because that's another UBI conversation we'll have in a little bit. But even though he gets his debt forgiven, he doesn't know how to live in the way that he needs to, with cash being king. Now, there's a very old terminology, but cash being king is super important for the people to realize that when we go into the NESARA point, the gold-backed standard will change, and that you'll be looking at your savings, and you'll have to save up for things. It doesn't mean you're not going to have credit cards, but the focus is not going to be on credit, but your ability to pay for that. In the past, when you have a debt kind of based society, it's not really your ability to pay for it because bankruptcy is just super easy and you can get more debt and you can get it forgiven and all, in these ways of the debt situation, which is really sick and it's bad for the economy, it's bad for the world. And so Scott needs to really relearn money versus Steve over here, who gets maybe a little bit of debt forgiveness, but he's and you go, well, it's not fair to him. But here's what happens. Both parties not just get the debt forgiveness, but they get a gold-backed standard for their money. So Steve, who's been very carefully and fiscally responsible, is way ahead of the game. So when Steve sees that debt forgiveness and he sees his gold-backed standard, he's going to be able to utilize his money and is going to be super far ahead of the guy the Scott over here that hasn't been paying, hasn't been dealing with his debt correctly. He's going to have to learn everything from scratch because he doesn't know how to live in that kind of environment. Steve, even though he's never gotten the full debt forgiveness, he might, and there could be other things that happen for Steve. But what I see with Steve is he is going to be so much farther along. He's going to handle himself better, and maybe he's opening up his own businesses. He's going to do much better financially in the long run than Scott would be because Scott was really bad with his finances. And you might say, that sounds unfair, and get mad about it. Calm down, guys. Let's be chill on this area because the reality is this debt kingdom that we've been living in has to die. So it has to go away because of what they've been doing and how they've been operating in the debt. Now we'll talk about some other things of UBI on another kind of event. So we'll kind of launch that out there as we go along. So I thanks so much for listening. If you want to look at it, you can go to Dr. Scott Young. You can look at donations. So I really appreciate donations. I mean, I'm affording all of my ministry on my own. So you can go to drscottyoung.com and you can donate, click donate up on top there. But I really, more than anything else, subscribe, like, ask questions. I'm happy to answer questions. But I do ask you to be nice. Realize I didn't create the problem. I'm trying to answer the problem in the best way that I can. Don't ask me when things are going to happen because I'm not part of the 10 people in the world that knows that. But what I do know is I've been studying this and I have inside information that kind of gives us some ability to know what we're talking about. If you're more interested in this, again, my YouTube channel has a lot more there that you can look at. And you can also go to NESARA and the Mark of the Beast, which is on my YouTube, YouTube channel. It's also more specifically on Dr. Scott Young. You can go to the bookstore and you can see NESARA and the Mark of the Beast. So thanks so much for listening. I appreciate it.